Well, I'm on the splash screen anyway. So
How do you like this? stream. We're Revolution Software, a studio based in Paris today. No, we're from York, and you probably know us from making such bangers as the Broken Sword franchise, and very lately the follow-up to Beneath the Steel Sky, Beyond the Steel Sky. But today we're in a very different setting, which we tried to make look like a gallery. Hope you enjoy.
Well, Wendy, you being Austrian, of course, you forced me to put out all the stereotypes, the French stereotypes, that from an Austrian perspective. We've got the brie, we've got the French flag. I'm wearing a beret. We've got the very French le cheddar cheese, very fine cheddar cheese. Really, I mean, just couldn't be more French. And of course, in the background, my favourite books are Tintin books, which are kind of Belgian, but they'll forgive us if because they speak French. They speak French, so let's put them in as well.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, we need to make clear that people don't need to have any interest in France whatsoever. But since this is French themed, puis-je commencer en français? Parce que je connais bien que Neil, il parle français aussi.
Un peu, oui.
Un peu, oui. Et je voudrais dire que quand j'ai eu 10 ans, j'ai resté au Lavandou avec une famille française et j'ai appris tout ma français pendant 2 semaines seulement. Et maintenant, j'espère que je peux parler français avec confiance. Et ça, c'est un plaisir de parler avec les Français en France. Mais malheureusement, tous les Français parlent anglais beaucoup mieux que je peux parler en français. C'est dommage, mais...
Yes, fromage.
Omelette du fromage? Is that the phrase?
Yep, I too. Je suis un grand fromage.
So, Wendy, if you're in charge of this, could you now stop Charles speaking French?
Switch back to English, please, Charles. Luke,
Okay.
I have one issue, though. I cannot see the stream live on YouTube. Are we sure that... Can you see it?
I believe so. We've got people in the live chat saying, like, nice berry, Charles, so I would imagine
okay, good,
it.
perfect. I'm so sorry.
I certainly hope
My laptop is really slow. I cannot have the camera running and something else on the laptop, and as you can see, my computer is busy doing work.
I mean, they could just have vision on the office. Who knows?
Oh no!
Oh, man.
I've closed the blinds. I don't want anybody looking in and seeing me looking like this. But do you not think that also Neil? I mean, it's very impressive that he's gone to the extent of wearing a Breton cap, and looks like he could have come straight out of the French countryside. Really, I mean, I'm Paris. He's northern France.
Well, no, this is in fact a Yorkshire hat, a genuine Yorkshire hat. I did buy in York, yeah.
So the celebration is that Beyond the Steel Sky, which we're very proud of, and we're thrilled that 2 weeks ago we released an update that had the French language.
Yay.
And I know, isn't that exciting? And the reason that we were late was that the language came in late was because what always happens in development is you record the English first, and then the localized versions, they use the English as reference, and have wonderfully talented actors that can then will require less direction because they can hear what the tone and the approach from the English perspective is. So we did the English first, and then the terrible COVID hit, and unfortunately the studios closed and we weren't able to get French actors. So many apologies for people who were waiting for the game in French and have had to wait a few weeks. So it was beyond our control, and you must forgive us. So what we've got today is we have Neil, who I have worked with for how long, Neil?
23 years, Charles. I looked it up the other day. Yeah, I think it was 1997. Long time. But that's half your age. That's half your age.
It is. I know, that's appalling, isn't it? That's terrifying. But and do you not think that I mean, Wendy keeps saying how young we both look. I mean, and she's right.
I am right. I like being right.
Yeah, I think there's a problem with your camera there, Wendy, actually. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I tried to open a browser and my computer shut itself.
No, I'm sorry. That was a pathetic attempt at a joke there. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. My computer started
Wendy,
stuttering.
Can I just be clear that your camera shut itself?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just thought that
shut completely down. Yeah.
To our wonderful viewers, I just wanted to make sure they didn't think that you'd said something considerably ruder.
Oh no.
And then also we want to we also want to introduce the world to the wonderful Luke Super Mario, who is not only the maestro, the master of ceremonies, Mr. MC himself. But was one of the level design scripters for Beyond a Steel Sky, and worked when Neil. I mean, should we talk a little bit about the process of how this worked? Well, we will. That's the rhetorical question. What generally happens is Neil started working on In Cold Blood all those years ago, and we worked close in, and has worked with me and Revolution ever since. Indeed, we also worked on the Da Vinci Code, didn't we, Neil? All those, a few years back.
The game that is so rarely mentioned, Charles.
The game that is so rarely mentioned, and we'd like to take responsibility for all the good parts, but for none of the bad parts, which is probably fair.
Can I have that in my end of year review as well?
But broadly, what happens is that when we're writing games, we will come up with a rough design and then implement it. Maybe Luke, why don't you talk through the process?
Okay, so just like the general overview of how say for example a level came into being in Beyond the Steel Sky, yeah. Yeah, sure. So we would tend to get a design from our very, very talented lead designer Ross, who is having to put up with the fact that I'm talking very loudly about him about 2 meters away, but we would build from that, and obviously Charles would have been involved at that sort of scale as well. We would then, so if you take for example the introductory level of Beyond the Desert, hopefully that's not spoilery. Essentially, I would have gotten a spoil the intro. That's how I roll. I would essentially get a rough level design about the sort of core beats, what you need to do in that level, how you would progress, that sort of thing, and then essentially it's building on top of it. I almost like to picture it a bit like a little Lego structure. You sort of get the foundation already there, and you like jam all these little bits of different coloured blocks on top and see which ones actually make sense, and then they eventually get taken away when they don't work or don't look right, and then you replace them with little other blocks and stuff, and just sort of go from there. Sorry, I've just noticed someone say that my volume's pretty low, so I'm just tweaking that mid thing. Yeah, so essentially it's a building process. You have your sort of like bottom layer, then you build and build and build, and then it gets to a point that, like for example, whenever dialogue comes along, we would write sort of like the initial pass on it, I suppose, to get like a very brief understanding of what we need across, and then it would go forward to Charles or to Neil for a proper rewrite and things like that, and then it would come back and then go back and go and come back, go back, come back, go back. And it's just a really good little iterative process. As I say, the building blocks is the analogy that I love to use, because essentially that's what you're doing. You're building your own little city out of Lego in many ways.
And what generally happens is I'll work closely with Neil on the story, and then Neil, you tend to bow out for a bit, don't you? And then come back in again towards the end and do a kind of blitz where you can question the motivations, make sure, look at it from a fresh perspective, make sure that the motivations are right, make sure that the characters are behaving in the way, and actually knowing the story, because as a co-writer of the story, it's great to then be able to see it from afar and not have any of the emotional attachment that you would have had you been scripting it from the start. Neil, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I'm unlike most of the people in the process. I'm actually not working in the studio, so I'm a freelance writer, and at any one time, I'm probably working on 3 or maybe 4 projects: books, TV, movie, animation, and games. So I'd sort of rotate my projects, and I come back. Something like a game development is fantastic. Really, it's going to last a couple of years, and I might come in and work intensively with Charles for perhaps 3 months, perhaps at an initial story stage, and then disappear. Well, all the whole team sort of they get stuck in, and they get their hands into the entrails of this stuff, and they smear it all over the wall, and they make a big fine mess. And then Charles calls me back in to look at this big fine blood splattered mess, and try and figure out. Well, first of all, I've got to figure out who did it, because you need to find a culprit pretty quickly, and then we get to work, sort of reassembling the body. And I'm always coming at it from a story point of view. So although I totally understand and appreciate that it is a game and everything's about playing and about the sort of functionality of playing, behind it all, I'm really always looking to see if characters make sense, if their journeys are fulfilling and the arcs are there, and sometimes trying to get people to sort of sacrifice things that they love, because in the longer term, maybe it doesn't quite fit the general kind of mood or feeling of the game. So I work with Charles as a kind of, he's the director writer, and then there's probably about 4 or 5 people on the team who are also contributing a massive amount of writing, and that's everything from story beats to dialogue. So there's sort of a major co-writer alongside all of us, Kevin, who, like me, is a freelance writer. And within the studios, Matthew, Ross, Lawrence, Nina, and Luke, everybody, they're all, often they've got fun characters that they really, really like, and they want to really concentrate on them. And lots of the funny lines come from the guys in the studio, and it's always fantastic to see that when I'm brought back in with my detective stroke paramedic hat on.
One of the things that we thought was important was to add some degree of player agency over the narrative. And I think, we haven't had this conversation, Neil, but I think broadly we would say that since this is a series, and since Robert Foster comes forward from Beneath the Steel Sky, that actually a strong character arc for the main protagonist is probably not appropriate. And therefore, what you want really powerful character arcs from the secondary characters, because they're the ones that are going to be left behind. And they're the ones that you need to experience the change in, because ultimately, without wishing to give any spoilers away, Robert Foster comes back to Union City after 10 years and leaves again. So while he has changed, he hasn't had a profound change. It's the characters that have been affected by him that have changed profoundly.
Yeah, no, I agree, and actually, I've always found that within a game environment, I actually get a deeper emotion from seeing the results of my actions on characters than I do from that strange sort of half agency that you have as a player. So looking at the Broken Sword games, I love it when a secondary character has a completed arc that's the result of the stuff that you've done, and their lives could have gone a different way, and that I think can equal, or actually is a higher level of emotion than you get even in a classic theatrical tragedy at its best. In a piece of Shakespeare or Molière, anything like that, when you actually really change the life of a character and you see them emote on screen because of what you've done. It's a fantastic feeling. I'm sure everybody in the team.
It's not very often that our games get compared to Molière and Shakespeare, and I think we'll take that one. One of the other things, if you remember, was that we actually Nina was very keen on this, was that we gave agency to the character, to the player, over the story arc. And one of the things which, again, not for spoilers, is that the way that the player chooses to respond to Songbird, who is the wife of Graham, I won't say any more than that in case people haven't played, actually profoundly changes her story arc. And I think that was a kind of interesting idea, because a lot of people say, oh, there should be multiple endings. And this is one of my many bugbears. You know, it's really, really hard writing one good ending. The idea that you can write multiple endings is so profoundly, well, I won't say, because people will disagree with me, but I don't believe that it's possible to actually write more than one good ending. But what we worked on for Beyond the Steel Sky is this idea that actually the other characters, although you will have the ending that fulfills the final arc of Foster, how you get there via the other characters can actually change. And I thought that was quite interesting. And I remember talking to the guys at Telltale who wrote the first Walking Dead, and one of them got off and went off to the toilet, and he said I'm off to the toilet, and his writing partner, whose name I've forgotten, said, Charles will remember that, which was a real kind of in joke for anybody who plays the Telltale games. But the reason that they do that is because the player must be absolutely clear and knows that there is actually something that they're affecting. Whereas we went the other way. We deliberately played it down. And so you might go through, in fact, you almost certainly will go through the game without knowing that you had choices. And then the achievements come up and you go, ha ha, actually, or I hope you go, ha ha, you might be mighty, miffed, but hopefully you'll go, ha ha, actually, I didn't realize that I had, that these subtle changes. So we went a completely different route to the way that Telltale went in the way that they gave agency to the narrative.
I've got to say, one of the things that I really enjoyed after Bass launched, and again, no spoilers here, but I saw someone mention like, oh, it's a shame that such and such happens in the story, and I was like, is that the only thing that can happen? And it was sort of a satisfying thing knowing that someone else would respond and say, actually, that's not quite what happened for me, and then re-prompt someone's interest. It was so fascinating, sort of having that almost insider knowledge that it's like, look a bit further, maybe,
Can we also say, Luke, that when people post comments, they're incredibly valuable, and we spend, we take them very seriously. So you might like put a little Facebook message in, or come onto Discord, or YouTube, or whatever, Twitter, and we kind of do read them. And Wendy's absolutely brilliant at getting back. And obviously she then feeds these comments onto us, but we do go and read a lot of them ourselves. So good or bad, they're really, really valuable, and we thank you for taking the time to make those comments. I mean, all I was going to say, and then I won't say any more on this unless you guys do, is that one of the most complimentary things that really excited me was when somebody wrote that they were thrilled that in playing the game, the puzzles didn't seem like they were blocking you. They felt like they were part of the story and that you were solving the story. And that's something that Neil and I work on really carefully. We don't want puzzles that feel like blockers. We want puzzles that are intertwined with the narrative so that you reach something that's stopping you. And because you as the player have complete confidence that you know what the world events are, you know what the character motivations are, you know that in the same way that in a film, it would be if you do the Robert McKee, the expectation gap. It's the idea that actually you're overcoming those problems through the narrative rather than solving puzzles just to move the game forward.
Yeah. So other people's stories within the games, other people's journeys that we've all decided are actually the obstacles and the confrontation and the conflict that you need to overcome through your actions. So the puzzles actually represent people's story ambitions, the characters' story ambitions. which are really true in Broken Sword, actually. I mean, for instance, you come into a hotel and you've got to get into a hotel room 3 stories up, and you know that you've got to solve the receptionist's love life problems before you're going to get the key to get in. I mean, that's a sort of classic. I know you hate the word, as I do, trope. It's a trope, Charles. I think in French that would be un trop.
Un trop, absolutely.
I'm glad we're putting some French words in again.
We'll say it's morphed from the French. Yeah, no. That's absolutely true. So yeah, so it is the logic of the characters, and I sometimes wonder or worry, Neil, that we get a little bit too obsessed with that. But I'm sure, yeah, with the because the logic of the world that I have said before, and I'll say a million times that you are a very successful linear story writer. Your books sell extremely well, particularly in Germany, don't they? And we're really proud of you for that. Now, I would argue, and you're in a much better position, but I would argue that extra dimension of interactivity adds a real level of complexity beyond the linear story, because we, in an ideal world, would have all of the richness that you would have in a linear story, but we have that extra dimension of interactivity, which requires us to make sure that the player's intervention is logical, and whatever's blocking you is logical in terms of overcoming those problems.
No, absolutely. I mean, every game that I work on is a challenge, and a lot of different games that I've worked on challenges for very different reasons. But the interactivity, I mean, if you're writing a book or if you're writing a TV script or a play, then the medium exists already. It's cast. There is a stage, or there are some actors in front of a camera, and we all record it and we cut between them. But every single game that as a writer you work on, you're in a completely new space where the technology is creating totally new methods of delivering narrative. So, I mean, a couple of years ago, I worked on the Planet of the Apes game, and that's a massively different, it's an interactive process from this. It's like reinventing the world, compared to Beyond a Steel Sky or a Broken Sword. The rules of engagement have to be completely discovered or relearned.
That's also one of the traps that young developers, so old developers as well, like all developers generally, get in, is if you have a game that is 5 years in the works, which is pretty average, to be honest, for a bigger game, especially if companies don't have like massive funding to expand immediately. Like, how do you plan a game 5 years ahead of its of its tech standard? And you can fall really easily into the trap of like, oh, we have new technology, let's incorporate that, let's upscale to this, and so it's really important that right in the beginning you have like the strong vision, the strong brand, the strong imagery to back up exactly the kind of vision that you want to create, and know exactly the tools that you want to do it with, while still staying agile enough to stay current.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's so precarious. I mean, who really would be a developer? You have to be you have to be able to look 5 years ahead in terms of the technology, and because it's such a long lead-in time, you actually have to look further ahead in terms of story and ideas than somebody who's working in movies or in TV does. I mean, there's a sort of classic thing that in the TV or the film world, you really, as a writer, as a creator, you need to be 2 or 3 years ahead of the zeitgeist, because you need to be obsessed about ideas now that the public are going to be obsessed about in 3 years' time. So, my gosh, you really have to be reading not just the magazines they're reading. You've got to be reading and watching the stuff that's going to filter into those. You've got to read the specialized stuff way ahead. So for Charles, with this, with Beyond the Steel Sky, very early stages, we were looking at ideas of AI and social control and what's happening in China and so on, and constantly looking over our shoulder, thinking it will be 2 years, before we get there. Will this have gone out of date? How can we look at this idea and be ahead of everybody else in the way that we're thinking about it? Charles, you're fantastic at that. I mean, it is great working with you, because you are you really are a thinking creative producer. You know, there are not many producers around like you, and that's the end of the flattery. So that's quite.
Do go on.
No, keep going.
Thank you, Neil. No,
Say
please.
more words.
I think I'm blushing, but I think on this point, shall we move forward, because we're meant to be celebrating France and the wonderful French. I'd like to talk a little bit about the early days, if people will allow me to. Luke, what year were you born?
Oh, I don't think I should be giving that away on stream, should I? I'm trying to look hip here with my backwards cap and my hoodie, right? You know, but 87.
87, right. So we're going before you were born.
Fantastic.
I would like, Neil, what are your memories of first going to France?
Oh gosh, that came out of nowhere. Well, God, I mean, France was in black and white in those days.
Was it not in Technicolor? Britain. So since I've rather caught you on the hop, I'm going to answer the question. I first went to Paris with my mother in about 1969, 1970. I was born in 62, so I'd have been about 7 or 8. And in those days, Britain was really, really poor. And it was grimy and gritty, and everybody went on strike all the time. But one of the great blessings was that our food was really, really simple. I mean, it was good food, but we didn't have any of this. We had no foreign influence whatsoever. We had no European influence. So one of the great things is that, you know, you got brought up on Irish stew and, you know, and simple food. So actually going abroad was the most incredibly exciting thing. And because you taste things that you'd never ever tasted before. And aged 8, I remember.
Season?
Sorry?
What is this seasoning you speak of?
Well, exactly. What is this? Exactly. Well, you know, the salt and curry powder.
And vinegar. Vinegar is a season in England.
It is, but honestly, people used to make curry. You know, what used to be a curry was just what you normally ate with curry powder sprinkled on it. I'm right, Neil, aren't I?
Maybe a slice of banana added.
And some pineapple.
Yeah.
And tinned pineapple. So England was really quite poor in the early 70s. It was fun, but it was pretty grim. So to go to France, which is a lot richer, and the food was more exotic, and people wore better quality clothes, and it was quite different. And I often think that the Paris of Broken Sword is very much the Paris that I remember in either the late 60s or the very early 70s. But one of the most terrifying things was that I needed to. I asked my mother if she knew where the toilet. We were waiting in the airport, and she said, "Go and ask that policeman." And I said, "I can't," you know. And she said, "Go and ask the policeman." And it took me about 5 minutes to build up the courage to go up to him and say, "Excusez-moi, monsieur, où est la toilette?" And I was so excited because he said, "Oh, c'est là-bas, tout droit, à gauche." And like that. I didn't understand a word that he said. But a real French person had actually understood my question. Where is the toilet? It was so exciting.
That is a rush when you learn a language, though.
It is. Yeah. It is. And what I said before in my French was that I then was so bad at school at every subject, but particularly French. And my mother, bless her, arranged for an exchange. And I went over to Nice, and I spent 2 weeks with a family, and they spoke no English and had no interest in speaking any English. And I learned all my French in those 2 weeks, and I'm not sure I've got any better since. But you know, it was great. And then the other memory I have is that when back in the early 80s, when we were writing games on cassette for the Sinclair ZX81, so that would have been 1981. we were invited to go to a French and a Belgian show, and the idea, it was so exotic, and so I filled my car up with cassettes. It was a really old, it was a Renault 10. Look it up. It's as ugly as sin. It was my first car. I was very proud of it. And I had to drive. I remember getting an export license, which took me the best part of a day. And God forbid that's what we're going for unless something gets agreed. But that's a different subject. And driving down to Dover, because it was before the Channel Tunnel existed. And I was held up because they needed to check the goods. And in the end, the ferry that I was booked onto left because they held me for so long. So they said, well, you can go on the next one, which was a cargo ferry full of enormous, great trucks. So I drove my terrible little tin can onto the ferry, and I was surrounded by trucks. I remember it being very well. And Neil, you were saying that you have similar memories.
Well, yes. I mean, I got into the whole business of writing by driving trucks on films and in TV and commercials, and so I used to drive big trucks, actually, Charles, not that little Renault 10. I was actually one of the big trucks, so I would go through and drive all the camera gear all the way down to the south of France, and we'd shoot for sort of 3 days, and then I'd drive it back again. Always staying in the most incredibly luxurious hotels. I mean, I've stayed in that beautiful hotel at Saint-Paul-de-Vence above Nice, or above Cannes. I can't remember. Is it above Cannes? No, it's above Nice, I think, isn't it? In the hills above Nice. Because the very democratic nature of film crews, no matter how low you were down the scale, just as an oily rag of a driver, they would still put you up in the same hotel as the director.
Wow.
So, and
that is very nice.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And if pink champagne was ordered, you would all get it. So,
wow.
So I actually learned a lot about
the future
France.
that liberals want.
Yes.
Exactly.
Champagne for all. Pink champagne for all. Yes.
But in a way, my first experience of France was staying in 5-star hotels at somebody else's expense. Really, aged 18 and 19.
I want your childhood.
and what was exciting about is that nobody spoke English, so you really had to speak French, and if you did, then people loved it because I think speaking another language is a sign of respect for that culture, and so it's a real privilege to be able to speak reasonable French.
On that subject, I would love to know if there's been feedback on the French version of the game, and if what the accents are like, and how has that been managed, and because we work incredibly hard to have a variety of Australian or London or Northern accents in the English language version. So honestly, I'm really, really interested. So what do the French team do with that? Do they have Marseille and Paris, and do they make the idiot come from a particular corner of France that everybody finds quite funny?
Just very quickly before we do jump onto that one, I just want to remove the picture on it, but that's the Renault in the middle of the stream, if anyone's wondering why there's a car there now. I just thought I'd pull up a picture of a Renault 10 as far as Google can
I almost asked you doing it. I'm glad you caught that.
So that'll be
Isn't
going
it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful?
Anyway, sorry, carry on.
He traveled in style, he did.
I did.
By the way, I asked in chat what some first memories were of people going to France, and if they haven't, where would they like to go? Somebody said they live in Lyon. Somebody said they were staying at Eurocamp and playing cricket with their dad, which is very sweet. One said, one memory I have of France was not being allowed into the hotel we booked for a family holiday. That sounds French, yeah. Somebody said, I'm eating sausage and batter and chips as you speak.
That's not very French, is it?
I think that might have been in reference to the curry powder from earlier and,
yes,
I
think it
the
was.
meals we eat from over here.
Somebody said usually they're camping at La Croix de Viewpoint. I took Latin. You can't make me say 6 French words in a row. Are you crazy? But they stayed somewhere with a ravine, Maybe.
Oh,
They said it's a lovely place, and I have
Riviera?
to trust them.
I
Yeah,
think-
it says Ravine.
Ri-
I'm pretty
Riviera,
sure.
I think it is. Riviera.
Yeah. Maybe?
Oh, the
I don't
Riviera.
know.
Oh, the Riviera.
And
The
somebody
Riviera
said they went
is
to Disneyland. Yay!
the
Cheers.
Riviera is lovely. The Riviera is the Côte d'Azur. This is where Neil and I are talking about. It's
Okay.
it's from Nice across Cannes, and I'll tell you what, actually, because Nice to Cannes is quite a long way, and the taxi costs a fortune. What used to cost exactly the same was to get a helicopter. There were 6 people would get in a helicopter and go from. I only did it a couple of times, but my God, you feel $1 million in a helicopter, and it flies out into the Mediterranean, and then comes and it lands, and it's not stupidly expensive. Not, I mean, as I say, a taxi was more expensive.
Oh, we are obviously in a beautiful art gallery in Paris. We rented out the Louvre just for this.
Ah.
Oh yeah, and if you guys played the French version of Beyond the Steel Sky, could you let us know in chat how we did with the localization? If they picked a variety of accents, as Neil pointed out, like did certain characters sound more posh and other ones more working class? Did that kind of fit the casting? We'd love some feedback on that, because that's really important. Like, as somebody, like, I don't speak French. I think Charles speaks very good French, but it's still not, being native is something very, very special, and that kind of feedback is incredibly valuable.
Wendy, can we offer a big prize to the first person who can identify the lines that I delivered in French?
Okay, Charles will draw your portrait. It might be a stick figure, but he will. If you can identify the first few French sentences he said, you can, after the stream, go back and look at the VOD if you want
No,
to.
you're going to have to. You're going to have to wait, because it hasn't gone in. It goes in the next update.
Oh, okay. All right. That's what you mean. I thought you meant in the beginning of the stream.
No. In the game,
okay.
in the game itself.
Well, we haven't really given it away yet.
Neil's looking absolutely horrified. Horrified. I don't blame you.
Well, I'm just trying to work out what could you possibly be saying.
There you go.
I was more seeing the cogs behind your eyes there, Neil, as what has he done to my brilliant dialogue?
I'm sure he's done a fantastic.
Oh, sorry.
No,
speaking of big prizes, in case you didn't know, guys, we have currently an art contest running. You can do anything. You can pick any Revolution topic. You can write a short story. You can draw a Revolution character and Halloweenify them. You can cross stitch. I don't care. Do something creative that is Halloween related with existing Revolution characters. Show us your art. Post it either on the Facebook thread, the Twitter thread, or post it in our Discord. And Charles will pick his favorite one, and the prize is a private video chat dinner date, and we order you pizza to your house.
Wow.
And it's going to be like an hour-ish, but who knows, maybe you'll hit it off. But remember, he's a married man, so.
So the first prize is a dinner date. The second prize is 2 dinner dates.
Oh. I see.
It's an old joke. It's an old joke. It's not a very good one. So, Wendy, should we talk a little bit about Paris and Broken Sword?
Yes, Paris in the fall, as
Paris in the fall. Yeah. Absolutely, or Paris in the spring, which is Broken Sword 5.
Yes.
But, as a enormous fan with childhood memories of Paris, Broken Sword does have quite a few locations, and a number of people ask us where they should go to. And I thought I'd just take this opportunity to just say that at the very beginning of Broken Sword 1, where it says Paris in the fall, the last months of the year, the end of the millennium and the last months of the year, or the other way around, we see a view from through a crow's eye, and then the camera turns, and you're looking over the River Seine. That, if anybody's interested, is when you climb Notre Dame. You can go to the bell towers, which you can't at the moment, which is very sad. But when you can again, then
Yes.
you can climb up to the bell towers, and there's a beautiful view looking from the Ile de la Cité, which is the island that you're on Notre Dame, and you're looking towards the Eiffel Tower, and the river snakes off into the distance. And that was the inspiration, and it's quite close to what we did. The other ones include the Royaume de Mort, which is the Kingdom of Death, and those are the catacombs the medieval catacombs that were cut underneath Paris. They were used both because they mined the stone, which it was used for building, of course, but then also for escape tunnels, and you'd have people living underground. And they the Templars, one of the things that's believed about the Templars is that when Philip le Bel's deputies arrived to arrest the Templars, they found none of the treasure there, and it's believed that the Templars had underground access to the underground catacombs and were able to move freely outside the jurisdiction of the French king and the royal. And what happened also in medieval times, which is interesting, is that the center of Paris got so overfull of cemeteries and bodies, and they moved just by Saint Eustace. They actually moved all of these bodies and piled them underground in the catacombs. So the Royaume de Mort is millions of bones of Parisians that were moved. And it's quite spooky, but also very beautiful, because what they do is they've arranged the bones by type, and they've created patterns, and it's extraordinary. And that's one of the other areas. Anyway, so those would be my top three.
Mhm.
Oh, there was one question about this. Let me scroll back up. Somebody asked, was Montfaucon
Montfaucon.
based on actual location in Paris?
Well, that's a really good question. So Montfaucon was where the gibbet,
That one.
the hanging took place, and so there is very little of Montfaucon left. You can go to Montfaucon. There is an area, but there's very little to see. So we didn't. If in that Broken Sword, what we did is we showed a history element showing Montfaucon, but we didn't pretend that there were still gibbets or there was very much there. So yes, you can go to Montfaucon, but there's not very much to see.
Actually, it's
okay.
quite interesting. You see, you can ask Charles any question about this, about the history or about the locations or about French history, and it is extraordinary. He just knows the answers. But when the game's working with Charles, when the games move into these very strange, kind of arcane areas of the unknown, or things that aren't quite true, I end up not being able to distinguish between fact and fiction. And there's quite often I have to say to Charles, "That's really fantastic, Charles, but tell me before I start talking about it, did you just make this up, or is it really history?" And I hope most of the time he's told me the truth. But I do remember at one point I said to Charles, hang on a minute, do ghosts really exist, or are they made up? He managed to bamboozle me so much I couldn't remember whether they were real things or not. You remember that, Charles?
I do, but we do take, as people, I mean, one of the wonderful things, of course, is that people just instinctively know that we take the authenticity incredibly seriously.
Mm.
And the big difference between, 1996, 1995, 1996, when we were writing Broken Sword, in those days, the original Broken Sword, in those days, obviously the internet didn't exist. And so you had to go and visit places. I mean, obviously, when I say had to, it was a pleasure. You had no choice but to. But then there was the pleasure of actually exploring those areas, talking to people, finding out firsthand. And so many stories now, and I wouldn't like to name Dan Brown directly, but so many stories, kind of feel like they're written with internet knowledge rather than firsthand knowledge. And maybe that's not fair, but certainly others tend to write these stories from the internet. And it means that it doesn't have an authenticity. You don't find the little details that weren't relevant for whoever wrote that particular report, but are relevant for the story that you want to write. And it's a huge privilege to be able to go to these incredible places and meet wonderful people. And Neil, I'm sure you'd agree. We have to be excited by these histories. We have to be excited by it, because if we're not, how on earth will the people who play the games be? And that's always my view. It's got to be exciting. And in many ways, these historical backgrounds are so much more interesting. Fact is more interesting than fiction, because in medieval times, people were doing the most extraordinary things to each other, and many of which sort of pale into insignificance today.
I have a kind of longer question, which is, first of all, how do you think placing Broken Sword so centrally in Paris and making Nico so unmistakably French has impacted not only your own game and your community, but how has it impacted adventure games as a whole, and how has the love that you've shown the French community pinged back to the love of broader adventure games and fed itself? How did that snowball?
A French person once said to me, you're French, you write them and they're all idiots, which really upset me, because it just was untrue. I thought it was untrue. Obviously, to that person, it was true. But let me sort of answer it slightly differently, because forgive me, because you guys were not. But right back in the early days, what I wanted was two characters that could build a friendship, but were different enough that humor would emerge from their differences. And at that time, it felt like a laid-back Californian, coming to Paris for the first time. Smart, intelligent, witty guy, but absolutely bewildered by European culture and the difference. And the Europeans, likewise, were kind of slightly bewildered by him. And so you have this, laid-back Californian, this very successful, or not very, very ambitious young French woman. And obviously, George fancies Nico right from the start.
Who wouldn't?
Indeed, who wouldn't? And that's really allowed us to both create a relationship based on friendship, but also hopefully humor between the characters because of the misunderstanding. And that clearly resonated. We're thrilled. We're also, because a lot of German people love Baphomets Fluch as well. Although we have been really, really bad at including lots of German locations, which is a terror which needs to be remedied, certainly. And Wendy, Austrians as well.
Please don't put Austria and Germany into the same game. We don't do well together, as the world knows. We had a messy breakup twice. Some things are just not meant to be.
So I think I better pull us back to France fairly quickly, hadn't I? Although I'm sure there's something to be said about that as well. But so it kind of resonated, and we were very lucky. And it's a formula that we want to keep, obviously, and have attempted to maintain. But then, as we were saying earlier about this idea of a relatively flat character arc, clearly George and Nico need to start, a new Broken Sword, not that differently to how they finished the previous one. So in many ways, Tintin, and here behind me is a poster that I love. Tintin, I think, does this very well. It's Tintin and his relationship with Captain Haddock. It's a fairly flat relationship. A lot happens between the two of them throughout the stories, but then the story arc generally tends to happen. They solve the puzzles, and somebody else has actually changed. I don't think I've answered that question at all. I'm so sorry.
No,
Neil,
but it was very
do you,
interesting.
Well,
help me here. Help me.
I don't know. I think you've captured the territory. You know, I mean, yes, a certain novelist did also paint an American in Paris, but that came after the first Broken Sword by some way, didn't it?
It did, and certain of our fans, and I'm sure somebody's going to put it on the thing, but our fans are very passionate that a young Dan Brown might well have played Broken Sword, since Broken Sword starts with, you know, an American goes to Paris, meets this, you know, ambitious young French woman, and they almost get killed in a conspiracy involving the Knights Templar. I mean, who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Sometimes you just gotta say yes to opportunities.
Yes. Well, I think.
And if he did, then that's great, and I'm very flattered, you know. And if he didn't, then it's fun to talk about it.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely interesting because I think that, you know, cultures that are, and I mean, France has done such a good job at in a world that's so heavily Americanized and so heavily like affected by the English, um, you know, like speech and culture, just generally like English speaking culture. It's done such a good job preserving its language, its heritage, like being jammed between an English speaking like empire and, you know, like German speaking countries. It's quite difficult to kind of like maintain this kind of culture and this kind of pride, um, because of this kind of like uh, preserving. Italy has a similar thing as well. It's just this, they are so appreciative of when a studio does make the effort, and when a game or a movie does make the effort and really localizes towards them, like not only with subtitles but with dubs, because it is such a different experience. And these industries and these not industries, what am I thinking of? These cultures are very like grateful and very appreciative of when you do cater to them, because so little else does.
Well, one of the things I said before, so forgive me if anybody was listening to this, when we did our German equivalent, although we didn't have a German flag, did we? Or neither did we have sausages or currywurst on the show. But what we said is that, you know, what the huge privilege of being able to work with, you know, very talented studios and actors is that, you know, for Broken Sword, it's called Baphomets Fluch in German, and it's called Chevalier de Baphomet in French. And I've met many, many French and German people who believed that the studio was German and French, because of the quality of the localization, and it felt like it was theirs, and we're really surprised. And you know, Revolution is an English studio, but we are proudly European, and we're proudly global, and we would very much hope that you know, we'd be seen as a European company and a company of the world, rather than, you know, specifically an English company. So that's what I would hope that people would see us as.
Yeah, especially because, like, I mean, Yoast, who's been here since, you know, like, Yoast is one of the co-developers and founders of ScumVM, which maybe you've heard of it. But he is also like an integral member of Revolution Software, and has for like, God, 25, 30 years, almost 30 years, right?
It's
Not quite
that long, but a long time.
long time, like long enough to call it 30 and round up.
Yeah.
And he's from the Netherlands.
He's Dutch.
Yeah.
Dutch, yeah.
8 years old when he worked on the first game with you, Charles. The guy is a genius.
He still looks it.
He looks like a baby, doesn't he?
He does have a good face. I don't trust it.
There is a big problem with having Dutch people on your team, though.
Oops. What is it?
That is that they speak such good English, generally much better than the English people do. And it's incredibly embarrassing. And even yesterday, honestly, Joost was giving me a really hard time about English grammar. Not mine, I have to say, and a spelling mistake. And we were sending something to Apple, and it had a spelling mistake, and quite rightly, and it's fantastic. He was outraged that we were having to send something that was in poor English, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And if we're working on stuff together, he is fastidious about grammar, and I just wish that all of our English colleagues were as fastidious themselves.
Oh, Luke, that's a shot at you. Straight in the eye.
I have been corrected multiple times by Dutch people, so I can't comment.
Oh man.
I tried my best.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you learn when you reach my age is never correct a Dutch person, because even if you think that they're wrong and you're right, you're almost certainly wrong, and that they are almost certainly right. It's just the way. I think it's something to do with I think they learn English in their mother's wombs and emerge into this world able to speak dozens of different languages. I don't know what it is about the Dutch. I have to say the Scandinavians are pretty much the same, but the Dutch are the absolute masters.
That is the exact point that I was making before, is these language areas are not being catered to. So when they watch media, they watch it in English with Dutch subtitles. So when their mom puts them in front of the TV because she has to get anything else done besides cleaning up after you, you watch a English program or an American program with subtitles. So it's and you've done that since the beginning of television, basically, except for like the few national owned produced shows like the news. But yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the nice thing about working with a company that has so many different nationalities, European mostly for us,
Yes.
is I don't know. I think it's funny because we all have different like social barriers. Like for instance, I remember when I started working with you guys, and I know like we checked it on Slack and stuff for like half an hour, and then we were like, hey, let's just jump into a meeting and discuss this. And the meeting had to start with, hi, how are you? Even though we've just been talking for half an hour. For me, the conversation flow was so organic into like just opening your mouth and speaking rather than typing. But the English people in the room were all like, hi, how are you doing? And in first few minutes had to be slowed down mentally and just be like, yes, let's talk, let's do the pleasantries and let's start talking. Well, I think Dutch people, and I mean, I'm calling myself here out, but I'm from Austria, we're more like, okay, this needs to be done. Who's gonna do it? I don't know, but it's really nice because it slows me down and it makes me more polite, which is probably a good thing. But it also speeds us up as a collective, I think, as well. Like it just gets us thinking more diversely, and that's the nice thing about this company, I think.
One of the stories, I think, just to add to that, which I think is quite fun, is that when our wonderful ex-producer Tobias was here,
Norwegian, no?
Norwegian, yeah,
Yes.
and his girlfriend came over, and they were desperate to go to a place called Gothland, which is the setting for a program called Heartbeat. Now, to us, Heartbeat, used to be on telly occasionally, and you'd occasionally watch it, and it was kind of all right, but there was a lot of other stuff. But for the Norwegians, because they were stuck between Russia and Western Europe, their government didn't want to show American stuff. So all of the stuff that they played was a lot of it was British, and what everybody watched was Heartbeat. So to the Norwegians, Heartbeat was a really, really big thing. And when they got there, they were so excited because they recognized the whole of the landmarks. And to us, this was the most ludicrous thing ever, because Heartbeat was just this
3 p.m. television program.
3 p.m. television that very few people watched, unless you were ill and sitting at home or really bored, and there was just nothing else on telly.
Literally,
is that a fair summary?
The only reason I remember it at all is
royalty.
the only reason I remember it at all is because it was my excuse to stay up later at night while I was a kid. That's all I remember about Heartbeat. Couldn't name you one character.
That's so cute. No, like
Neil, I hope we're not offending you. You're not a great Heartbeat fan, are you?
No, and I've never worked on it. I know people who have worked on it, so, but
Well,
Oh,
his girlfriend, his lovely girlfriend, Johanna. We were driving as we came over the hill with Gothland below. Suddenly, from the back, what she'd done is she'd lined up the song, which went heartbeat, da, 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 whatever it was, and it sort of rung out the Heartbeat theme tune. I mean, anyway, I was lovely. It was lovely that they were so excited.
Oh man, people are
Wendy,
reminiscing about the show in chat. I've never seen it.
Oh right.
I'm sorry, I've never seen it. I don't have a television set, and I've never had one. I do, however, I do watch television shows. I just stream them. So if I don't know of it, I can't find it. So I only watch what I know or read. I'm very boring that way. But yeah, somebody said in chat, Heartbeat was a classic, a staple of my Sunday evenings. That and Bird of a Feather.
There you go. And if you're of a certain age, Neil will remember this. One Man and His Dog. Do you remember that?
Well, I do remember it, Charles. I didn't stay in to watch it, I must say.
One Man and His Dog was Sheepdog. It was Sheepdog Trials, and it really. Luke, was that around in your day, or was it?
I can't say I've ever heard of that, I'm afraid.
No, I think you have to be of a certain age, and it was always on Sunday afternoon, between the religious programs, and it literally was a bloke with a couple of dogs herding sheep.
Oh, I would watch that. I have a Twitter friend I only follow because he does talk about game dev and he owns sheep.
Well, there you go. He should be watching One Man and His Dog, and also the slightly sexist connotations, because I think it would have to be one person and their sheepdog.
Wait, was it not the same man?
No. It was always a different man.
It was always a different man. Oh,
Yeah,
that's so cool.
yeah.
I'm actually going to watch this after we end the stream. Oh, by the way, after the stream, if you're not in our Discord, you should join, because we're teaching Charles to play one round of Among Us, and we're hoping that it goes really badly. So if you're not in Discord, it's discord.gg/revolution software, all one word. I'm going to put it in chat. We are also, it's also 6:15 already. So we should probably start wrapping this up. So let's do 5 minutes more of French stuff. Oh, you haven't even touched your brie yet, Charles.
No. The brie is not open yet, and this is all a facade, of course, because I have a bottle of Beaujolais Village, of course.
That one?
And I have a glass of not very convincing red wine, but it's actually cherry juice, I have to admit, and it's very heavily diluted. I probably should have made it a little bit redder. And that's kind of it. And I wouldn't have done any of this if you hadn't insisted, Wendy. So if anybody thinks that any of this is the stereotypical view of, the English view of French, it's actually the Austrian view of French. And she made me do it, and I'm sorry.
If you have any other requests for me to bully Charles into doing something, tag us on Twitter and I'll do it. As you can see, I have a big pull around here. But yeah,
she does, and also, I mean, I hate to say it, but honestly, cheddar cheese is such a great cheese, and
I'm very French.
I have a very dear friend who's very senior at Ubisoft, and he came to stay with us, and I tried to feed him English cheese, and drink English wine, and he absolutely refused. And the point is, I mean, our French red our English red wine is not great, but our English white really is quite good now. I'm afraid it is mainly down to global warming and the fact that, obviously we have, hotter temperatures, but also what I believe is that fantastic chalk that is in Champagne actually comes under the channel. Of course, the White Cliffs of Dover are chalk. And so the climate is now in the south of England is actually quite close to the climate of Champagne 20 years ago. So they say. I'm sure that, I don't know how much truth there is in that.
Tattinger are now growing vines in England.
Really? Gosh.
Yeah.
Speaking of global warming and things stopping or growing differently, nuts are affected by global warming. The roots of nut trees are very shallow. So in lots of areas where they used to be like flourishing nut trees, they're now dying because they can't reach groundwater anymore. It's super sad. So that's why nuts are getting more expensive. And they had nothing to do with France.
Nothing to do with France. But talking of France and nothing to do with France, we in Yorkshire, which is 200 miles north of London, we're quite a long way up north. I have a fantastic fig plant, and it produced loads of figs this year.
Ah, that's lovely.
And obviously global warming is appalling. Sorry?
I've yet to keep a plant alive.
No, I don't think the plant has any worries with groundwater in York. Not for a moment. But But yeah, no, that's not in any way to diminish the seriousness, of course. It is interesting how things have changed.
One last question, because Worms has posted it a couple of times now and I've always ignored it, I'm sorry. Is without spoiling too much, but there's a lot of Easter eggs that we put into our games. And he wants to know, or they want to know, how many of them were you facilitating an idea, and how many were team-produced ideas? Just roughly.
Oh.
Let's say, for instance, in Beyond the Steel Sky for now.
Okay. Well, Ross, who Luke was talking about, I would say maybe a third came from me and 2/3 from the team, or it might actually be even less from me. So probably a third from me. And obviously it's wonderful that the people are excited enough to play the game multiple times. I mean, what I see, the way I see it, is it facilitates the opportunity for people to play multiple times and realize that actually they're gaining more each time they do it, which is fantastic. Because to me, for me to play a game more than once, it has to be really good. I don't play games more than once normally.
So do you take that Maßstab? Do you take that like high do you take that knowledge into how to make games more replayable for yourself?
Well, as we said right at the very beginning, the idea of having some sort of agency over the story, while also accepting that people want to be told a powerful story that is written by human beings because it's about humanity. If I had a penny or a pound or a dollar or a cent for every person that's going to write the most extraordinary procedural narrative generator, I would be extremely rich. I'm going to pass this on to Neil because I'm sure he's got a much better, much more insight than me.
But you're completely in the dark now, dude.
I know. Very soon it is going to be completely dark here, and I'm going to have to leave. I'm going to have to go outside to turn the lights on in this room. So I'm actually being lit by the last vestige of natural light in England.
There it goes.
But Neil, what do you think about all of these people who've said that they're going to write procedural narrative generators and put us all out of work?
It'll never happen. It'll never work. I mean, it's just like people who still strive to sort of create poetry, using AI. You need the human soul there.
It's just funny instead of good.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
It works as a joke. It works as an entertainment form, but it's certainly not the same as having the human touch of somebody who makes a story that can make you feel emotions and have a red tape through a red string to follow, and give you all these amazing like Easter eggs and stuff like that. That just for now still takes a human touch, and I don't think we're going to see much more in our lifetime because we have a climate emergency to handle first. Yay! Sorry, that stream is not ending on a good note.
No.
Well, I'll make it end on a good note. You know, the whole Easter eggs question. The only way that Charles can answer is the ones that he knows about. Ooh.
Exactly.
Ooh,
I wasn't going to bring that up.
How do you measure the length of a piece of string?
Yeah,
That's
true.
Funny.
I'm talking about the achievements, not the Easter eggs. Sorry.
Oh.
But I'm also aware that in Broken Sword 2, I did not know about one particular slightly racy Easter egg that could be triggered.
It's already been raised in chat. I've been ignoring it.
I know.
Somebody just put that in. You didn't. Yeah, I was wondering like that. I was like, as soon as I met you, I was like, this is not a child's move. No,
that's that, and it's quite funny, and you know, it's funny because I didn't know about it, but it was a slightly distasteful. To let you know what it is that Nico goes away from faces away from the camera and lifts up her vest as if she's flashing away from camera. So you know,
he's just showing him how many awards she's won in a local cycling contest.
Yes. That's right. It's her 6-pack.
She's like, check them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lift. I press. All right. Do we want to follow Charles and us into? I mean, if you're welcome to stay if you want, Neil, as well. But I'm kidnapping Charles, and Luke, I'd be happy if you were there too, for at least one round of playing Among Us. We have to walk Charles into how to get this game first, so don't worry about going there right away. You can still go for a bathroom break.
Fantastic.
But yeah, we're not streaming
Neil,
that one.
Wendy, wouldn't you say that Neil looks absolutely brilliant, lit, just by the
It's
light?
good lighting, isn't it?
You're about to drop the next iPhone.
I wouldn't want to, come into a dark room and suddenly see your face sitting there. It would be terrifying.
Oh, I would. Neil's lovely.
Now he's a white cat away from telling me.
Where's he gone?
He's gone. I think.
Fantastic.
I like it. It's a good effect.
Yeah,
it's a great effect. It's a great effect.
I wish we could pretend we planned it.
Do you think that on that low note, is that? Do you think a time to?
Yeah, let's call it a night, kids.
Yeah.
Let's play one round of Among Us in chat. I'm probably staying around for a lot more, but I don't think I can keep Charles from dinner much longer. Yeah, and thank you so much for joining the stream. If you want to find more streams like that, we have some VODs uploaded as well. And what else can we say? Oh yeah, follow us on Twitter. It's @RevSoftGames. On Facebook, we have Revolution Software Official. And we also have Broken Sword Facebook groups. We have so many to keep track of. We keep reposting things, so it's not as important to be in the individual groups, but we still would love you to have you there. I do try to post a lot. And of course, we have an Instagram, which I've been neglecting much more than I'd like to admit, which is, oh gosh, what are we on Instagram? Revolution_software. Yes. And our Discord is just discord.gg/revolutionsoftware, all one word. It's really hard to get a consistent URL if you've been around on the internet since the beginning of it. So excuse us for having been so much impersonated. We can't get a consistent URL anywhere anymore. It's impossible. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to see me put Charles through more things, let me know. Tag me on Twitter is the best way to find us. To be honest, it's the easiest platform to update right now. And yeah, play Beyond the Steel Sky. Leave reviews.
Please do.
I think that's it. Oh yeah, and if you left a negative review and you don't want to change it, let me know, because I want to know what bothered you and I want to be able to fix it, please.
And I'll sort of help fix it as well.
So you can just literally DM me. All right, I think that's it. Do we have any other calls to action? Only that there's something in the works and I can't talk about it, but it's a secret project, as you might have seen. It's funny, I promise. But yeah, okay, that's it. Luke, shut her down.
See you later.
Lovely. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.